My name is Mateus Costa Santos. I am part of the Via Campesina Africa Regional Secretariat, and it's a pleasure to be with you. I would like to just invite quickly my comrade, my sister, Christiana Saitillowa from the World Forum of Fisher People from Lake Turkana in Kenya to introduce herself. She'll be moderating the session with me this morning. Welcome, Christiana. Christiana, are you there?
Yes.
My sister.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Mateus, for giving me the floor. My name is Christiana Saitillowa. I come from Lake Turkana, Kenya, and I'm the co-chair of the World Forum of Fisher People, which is a global movement focusing on the rights and on the rights of small-scale fishers and fishing communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Christiana. It's nice to have you with us. Our agenda for today is quite short. Our session should be about 1 hour and a half, and we hope to have you throughout that whole time. The first point in our agenda will be to provide some broad reflections on the corporate capture of our food systems and governance, with a particular focus on the African context. And we'll also give an update on the projected implementation of the UN Food Systems Summit outcomes. The second point in the agenda will be to discuss our position on the so-called common position that is to be launched by the African Union on the UN Food Systems Summit, a document that was leaked recently, and we feel quite strongly that we need to position ourselves on that, and we'll share that position with you there. And the final point of the agenda will be an initial discussion on the next steps and strategize on how do we move forward together from here through to the UN Food Systems Summit and its respective counter summit. And beyond that as well. So without further ado, I would like to now launch our first point of the agenda, where we'll be discussing, where we will be reflecting on how the UN Food Systems Summit exemplifies and intensifies the trend of corporate capture of our food systems and governance, which will not end with the summit on the 23rd, and also speak about the, we'll stop there. And for that, I would like to invite Nora McKeon, who is speaking also on, she's part of the liaison group of this Food Systems for People Independent Counter Mobilization and the CSM group working on the Food Systems Summit. So Nora, you're welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mateus, and greetings to all of you. It's great to see so many people in the room following the earlier wonderful African session that was held on the 27th of July that you'll be hearing about later on in this program. So it's my job to speak to the issue of corporate capture, the Food Systems Summit, and its follow-up from the global level. And let me start by noting that corporate capture of food systems is not new. It's been building up since the 1990s with the introduction of neoliberal policies, privatization, opening markets, withdrawing state support to agriculture in the global South, and of course with the WTO and the Agreement on Agriculture, which recast food as a commodity for export rather than a human right. And over the past 2 decades, we've seen an astounding concentration of corporate power in global supply chains. Already by 2015, the 5 largest traders in grains controlled 75% of international trade. it's important to underline that corporations would never have attained the degree of concentration and power they have without the complicity of governments, either in failing to regulate them or in actually pushing rules of the game that allow them to profit. Just one example of this, the TRIPS, the trade-related aspects of international property rights, which came into force in 1995 as part of the WTO, and as I think all of you know, enables corporations to patent products of their laboratories, including modified seeds that in fact derive from the fields of generations of unrecognized and unrewarded farmers, mostly women. And this TRIPS was actually drafted by corporate lawyers and pushed through the WTO machinery by the US government. But it's not only multinational agri-food corporations that are involved. We've seen also the deregulation of financial institutions starting in the US under Ronald Reagan, which has pushed a process of speculation on food commodities and land by powerful financial actors who have no interest whatsoever in growing, processing, transporting, or selling food, but merely see it as an object of speculation along with all the others. So up until the first decade of this century, corporations were able to get what they wanted without actually entering into the formal governance space through their economic and lobby power and their capacity to influence public opinion and to buy science in their favor. Then the 2007-2008 food and financial crises came along, and the international community had to react to the riots in capital cities around the world. And thanks to the lobbying strength of the food sovereignty movement and the determination of countries like Brazil and Argentina and institutions like FAO, which were very different then than they are now, it proved possible in 2009 to establish a reformed global intergovernmental but inclusive policy forum, the UN Committee on World Food Security, or CFS, which is rooted in the human rights framework like all of the UN. And in it, for the first time in the history of global governance, social movements and CSOs are full participants, able to bring their evidence and proposals into the room on the same footing as governments. In the end, it's governments who decide, and that's important because if they're not the ones who decide, they can't be held accountable. And it was just about this time that the corporations decided they needed to capture formal governance and not just influence it in the corridors. The key actor in this movement has been the World Economic Forum, which groups the world's most powerful multinationals, along with philanthrocapitalist foundations like Gates. Its recipe for what it calls progress is simple: technological innovation, digitalization, investment, and a narrow concept of science-based knowledge that excludes the wisdom of peasants, women, indigenous peoples. Its recipe for governance is what's come to be known as multi-stakeholderism. That means creating platforms and partnerships led by corporations with a sprinkling of people from governments, UN agencies, academia, civil society. It may sound democratic to bring all these stakeholders around the table, but if you don't pay attention to the differences in responsibilities, rights, and power imbalances of the different stakeholders, you end up with a table where the most powerful, the corporations, decide, and governmental accountability disappears along with the public sphere and human rights. The World Economic Forum has been pushing this kind of multi-stakeholder platform around the world for the past decade. Grow Africa and its land-grabbing agricultural corridors is just one example. And in Africa, of course, AGRA has been a key promoter of corporate interests and intrusion into policy spaces. Then in June 2019, the World Economic Forum signed a strategic partnership agreement with the Secretary General of the UN, giving it unprecedented access to and influence over the UN. and note that this step was an initiative of the Secretary General and the Deputy Secretary General, not a political decision by the Global Assembly of UN member states. Hundreds of civil society organizations signed a letter of protest to the Secretary General that remained without reply. Instead, 3 months later, the Secretary General announced his intention to hold a food systems summit. It's documented that the World Economic Forum has been a strong partner in this summit from the outset. In December 2019, the Secretary General named Agnes Kalibata, the president of AGRA, and a clear promoter of corporate private sector interests, to be his special envoy to organize the Food Systems Summit. Again, hundreds of CSOs signed a letter of protest, again without response. Unsuccessful efforts were made to raise civil society concerns with the Food Systems Summit Secretariat. Corporate influence, lack of transparency, failure to put human rights at the center and to respect and engage legitimate self-organized civil society and social movements, no attention to COVID-19. In October 2020, CFS's Civil Society and Indigenous Peoples Mechanism, the CSM, finally launched the autonomous People's Response to the Food Systems Summit with a call that has been signed up to by hundreds of social movements and CSO networks and organizations around the world. The Autonomous People's Response has since had 2 meetings with the Deputy Secretary General in which he accepted that our concerns are well-founded and suggested that we could agree to disagree. And in the meantime, the machinery of the FSS is doing all it can to co-opt and deform our narratives, starting with agroecology, and to dress the illegitimate Food Systems Summit up as a people's summit. The Autonomous People's Response organized a highly successful 4-day counter-mobilization in July at the time of the official Food Systems Summit pre-summit in Rome. You'll be hearing more about the vibrant Africa section that was a part of this autonomous mobilization. And over the past couple of months, many other actors have joined civil society in expressing concerns about the Food Systems Summit. A host of academics have written articles and blogs. Authoritative people who had accepted to work inside the Food Systems Summit have resigned, like Olivier de Schutter, the former UN Special Rapporteur on the right to food. And many governments have come to realize that the opaque processes of the Food Systems Summit have cut them out of the decision-making authority they should exercise in the intergovernmental human rights-based UN. So on the eve of the Food Systems Summit, 23 September, what can we expect to come out of all of this circus? It's important to remember that the Secretary General has the right and the mandate to organize one-day summit events to draw attention to global challenges that he feels are important, as in the case of the Climate Summit in 2019. But he does not have the mandate to launch follow-up processes and mechanisms. If he attempts to do so, he is usurping the decision-making responsibility of UN member states to negotiate and adopt measures to whose implementation they commit. Yet this is exactly what he is doing with the World Economic Forum actors behind him. The Food Systems Summit will not end as it should on 23 September. The outcome of the summit will consist in a weak Secretary General statement of action that commits only him, and a series of multi-stakeholder, quote unquote, coalitions of action on specific action areas like regenerative agriculture that have been shaped by corporate interests and grouped into 5 action areas. The hope of the FSS organizers is that these coalitions of action or corporate investment can be matched buffet style with national pathways that are claimed to be the outcome of legitimate, inclusive national dialogues held as part of the FSS process. But in reality, most of these dialogues have been organized hastily without involving those actors most concerned, and often with strong guidance by the FSS Secretariat, the Rome-based agencies, and in some cases, like that of Mozambique, AGRA. This marriage process is expected to be overseen and blessed by the UN country teams and the Rome-based agencies at national level, and at global level, a coordination hub led by the Rome-based agency secretariats. The Secretary General also intends to set up an advisory group to advise the hub with, and I quote, dedicated representation of priority constituencies and issues, youth, indigenous peoples, women, ignoring the inclusive intergovernmental CFS and the fact that the CSM already constitutes the biggest network of civil society and social movement organizations and networks and indigenous peoples in the world, established and operating in a legitimate, self-organized manner. Reporting will be from the UN country teams to the Secretary General, cutting out not only a legitimate civil society voice, but above all, the authority and accountability of member states. This represents a total theft of human rights-based governance in which governments and the public sphere are responsible for inclusively setting rules and policies with particular attention to rights holders and ensuring that corporations and other actors respect them. So the action scene now shifts above all to the national, sub-regional, and regional levels. And that's why today's event and the African mobilization is so important. Africa is a major target of all of this attention, and democratic governance and people's food systems have to be built from the bottom up. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that insight, Nora. That was quite insightful and informative. Thanks for that. I'd like to now invite Mohammed, our comrade Mohammed Hakesh, who will start giving us a contextualization of these challenges in the African situation, particularly in relation to the corporate capture of resources and lack of democracy. I hope Mohammed is with us. I saw him coming into the room and dropping. Mohammed, are you there?
Bonjour.
Hi, comrade. You're welcome.
Bonjour, je souhaite que vous êtes en bonne santé. Ce que je veux dire, c'est que l'Afrique est le continent qui devrait se manifester très fortement et se manifester le plus vis-à-vis du sommet de l'ONU, ou ce que j'appelle moi le sommet de l'agrobusiness, qui se prépare à mettre le sort du système alimentaire mondial et bien sûr africain entre les mains des sociétés transnationales et l'agrobusiness. Mais il ne faut pas oublier que les conséquences désastreuses des interventions en Afrique dans le secteur agricole et la présence des multinationales ou ce qu'on appelle les sociétés transnationales ne datent pas d'aujourd'hui. Il faut faire attention. Ce qui veut dire que le sommet veut légitimer ce qu'il fait maintenant. C'est ça la différence. Donc le sommet, pourquoi il est grave? C'est parce qu'il veut d'une part légitimer sa domination, et la camarade Nora nous a bien expliqué qu'il y aura des actions qui vont venir après le 23, et ça, tout ça, c'est la légitimation de ce qu'il va faire. Mais aussi, notre objectif, c'est marginaliser les mouvements sociaux, les sociétés civiles qui luttent pour la souveraineté alimentaire et pour le droit des travailleurs et travailleuses agricoles. Regardez aussi que je veux vous partager avec vous, en disant l'Afrique, je veux partager avec vous quelques passages d'un préface de Jean Ziegler, vous le connaissez, c'est un grand militant, d'un document qui a été d'un document de la déclaration de l'ONU sur les droits des paysans et qui a été édité par le CETM.
Mohammed, I believe, are you still there with us? I think Mohammed may have dropped from the call. In the meantime, let me invite Mariam Mayet from the African Center for Biodiversity to lay down.
Spinach.
Okay, Mr. Mwangi, I'm muting you. Okay, back to to us. Mariam, are you there with us? I would like to invite you to talk to us a little bit and share your views on this point while we wait for Mohammed to come back.
Thank you very much indeed, Matthias, and it's lovely to be back with all of you. So first, I'd like to send you all warm greetings and solidarity from South Africa. It has been and continues to be a great honor for our team at the ACB to be here with you today and to have accompanied you all on this journey. I've been asked to address the issues that have been raised both in the African statement that more than 60 organizations across the continent have endorsed, as well as the letter to the AU on its so-called common position. Both these documents have been through a rigorous process of internal democratic consultations and exchanges by and between smallholder food producers, to which we had a great honor to witness, learn from, and support. For this, we will always remain grateful to you. First, we all agree that the UN Food System Summit is a corporate captured machinery. Further to that, an African common position to the UN Food System Summit was leaked. This has ostensibly been developed by the African Union's Development Agency, NIPAD. Upon closer scrutiny, social movements have discovered that this position promotes a blueprint for industrializing Africa's food systems based on the Green Revolution model. These movements have found this position not to be coherent with other positions taken by African governments, highlighting the absence of democracy, accountability, and transparency that appears to have taken root in the African Union's machinery. The letter asks the all-important question that I'm sure you are all asking. Who decides what goes into an AU common position, and what stays out and who stays out? The movements have come to the conclusion that this position has not sought out pluralistic approaches to protecting and enhancing the practices of the continent's food producers and consumers. It is their view that it does not respect and enhance the right to food and generally human rights and the ecological well-being of our continent, and placing these at the center. This so-called common position of the AU is at odds with and undermines the forward-thinking work developed in regard to the UN's Declaration on the Rights of Peasants and other people working in rural areas, for which African governments voted overwhelmingly in favor. Movements have thus come to the conclusion, and we support them in this, that the AU's position is not only unforgivably undemocratic, but it promotes market-based approaches that are inherently exploitative in nature and privileges the privatization of resources and public goods. The so-called common position claims that it emerges from an inclusive process of country and regional dialogues, which incorporated a diversity of voices from the grassroots. We collectively, with the social movements, we support them, vehemently challenge the veracity of this claim to be true across the continent. Most of these so-called independent dialogues were organized by national governments with indecent haste, with little effort being made to include the wide array of constituencies, and which typically involve predefined agendas developed. In some countries where there is a strong peasant movement presence and platforms and were involved in the national level dialogues, their concerns that they have expressed do not and have not been reflected in the AU's common position. If all these dialogues really were inclusive of a plurality of grassroots voices, perspectives, and priorities, this would be reflected in a more considered, deep, and transformative common position based on agroecology, family farming, and territorially embedded food systems in which markets perform a range of social and cultural functions, such as well as economic. The so-called AU common position is unsurprisingly and ominously silent on agroecology and other truly ecologically sustainable and socially just approaches to food production. Most of these dialogues, therefore, mischievously excluded the most important constituencies who produce the largest share of food in Africa, which is astoundingly at 80%, as also identified, ironically, in the same AU common position. This position portrays a captured AU, tying our futures to the global economy based on extraction, ecocide, inequalities, and exploitation of our peoples and our resources. Alarmingly, a plethora of continental policies are being steamrolled from within the AU machinery, targeting in particular seed. These unashamedly promote a range of false solutions as a means of creating exploitative markets and extracting profits by mostly northern corporations at the expense of African food producers, ecologies, and citizens. We say categorically that when this so-called common position is presented to the UN Food Systems Summit as either a common position of all member states of the AU or that of small-scale food producers of all kinds, the world must know that this is an unprincipled approach. We further say that the so-called common position appears to represent a vision merely of a cabal within the AU and its corporate collaborators and imperialist institutions. Nevertheless, we remain hopeful that the many good African governments reading this open letter will hear us and engage meaningfully and honestly with small-scale food producers so that we may together embark upon a collaborative journey towards transforming our food systems for the benefit of all Africans, our food systems, ecologies, and future generations. To summarize from the documents, we need African food systems that serve the people and the planet. We need democratic deliberation that brings in the knowledge, experiences, and voices of African food producers and movements to elevate our struggles to advance food systems that are grounded in human rights, biodiversity, ecological integrity, and broader social ecological well-being. Both the statements supported by more than 60 organizations across the continent and the letter are on the People Movement's website, where the demands are fully set out. We encourage you to please, if you haven't done so, to sign on. I thank you so much for your time, and we look forward to our onward journeys together. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mariam, for that. Yeah, just a quick note for those of you listening with us. The links for all of these documents are being posted in the chat by our comrade Diedre, so please follow the links in the chat to have access to the full documents that we are referring to here. In the end, Mariam, because we had lost Mohammed, we kind of you kind of segued us into the second point of
D'accord, merci de.
Mohammed, I'm coming to you now.
Oui, je vais essayer.
Just a second.
Merci. Bah, je ne sais pas, peut-être Zoom n'a pas voulu écouter la vérité, quoi. C'est pas grave. Donc il a coupé. Il a coupé. Donc je continue en disant, de toute façon, je vous parlais de ce préface qui me paraît très important, en parlant bien sûr des échanges inégaux, de multinationales, comment ils font, etc. en Afrique. Donc il parlait de ce Sandaga où la ménagère peut y acheter variantes selon les saisons, les légumes et les fruits portugais, français, espagnols, italiens, grecs, et à la moitié du prix du produit autochtone équivalent. C'est très important. Quelques kilomètres plus loin, sous un soleil brûlant, le paysan Olof, avec ses enfants, sa femme travaille jusqu'à 15 heures par jour et n'a pas la moindre chance de conquérir un minimum vital décent. Voilà le plus important que j'ai pu vous apporter dans ce sens. Et pour être franc et dire les choses comme elles sont, la situation sociale pour la majorité écrasante des ruraux en Afrique et leurs familles est très lamentable. Le continent africain manque des moyens, des moindres conditions nécessaires pour une vie respectant la dignité humaine. Les compagnies africaines souffrent de la pauvreté, la maladie, l'analphabétisme, le manque des services sociaux et les établissements scolaires. Et ce caractérise surtout les pandémies nous a bien sûr délivré tout ça et après ça. Donc, se caractérise par l'approfondissement des disparités sociales et régionales. Les ruraux des pays africains paysans et ou la ouvrier agricole ou la pastoraux autochtones, pêcheurs, jeunes hommes et femmes vivent sous la domination, bien sûr, du capitalisme et de l'agro-business qui bafouent leurs droits politiques, civiques, économiques, sociaux et culturels à travers la déposition de leurs terres, leurs eaux et l'exploitation de leur force de travail ainsi que de leur emploi moyennant les bas salaires et l'absence de toute sécurité sociale et de respect du droit du travail. Tout ça, bien sûr, existe déjà, je veux dire. C'est pour cela que quand je parle du sommet, je le vois en tant qu'un tribunal qui va légiférer. Je veux dire, c'est un parlement international des grands, disons, États qui nous dominent et qui va légiférer et qui va légitimer tout ce qui se passe actuellement. Par conséquent, nous, qu'est-ce qu'on va faire? Je peux vous donner des exemples quand on parle, par exemple, des accaparations des terres. Vous savez très bien que les accaparations des terres, ils sont partout. En Afrique, c'est très, très, très connu. Et au Maroc aussi. De toute façon, il y a des multinationales, des transnationales qui arrivent au Maroc aussi et arrivent partout en Afrique. Qu'est-ce qui se passe? Il y a l'accaparement des terres. Il y a l'accaparement des terres, il va donner quoi? Il va donner que les paysans vont être expulsés de leurs terres. Et on a beaucoup de chiffres, soit au Côte d'Ivoire, soit un certain nombre de pays, là où il y a beaucoup de paysans ils ont trois destinations. Soit qu'ils deviennent prolétaires, des ouvriers agricoles, soit qu'il vient s'émigrer, il traverse le Maroc et il veut aller en Europe, soit qu'il intègre le terrorisme. Les jeunes, chez nous, il y a beaucoup de jeunes qui ont intégré parce qu'ils ne trouvent rien à faire. Donc, regardez-moi ces trois conséquences de cet accaparement des terres. Il y a l'accaparement des eaux. Je vous donne l'exemple du Maroc que je connais bien. En 80, la nappe phréatique, pour avoir de l'eau, il faut 80 mètres. Maintenant, il faut plus de 250 mètres pour avoir de l'eau. Donc, qu'est-ce que vous voulez que ce petit paysan, malheureusement, c'est ce qu'on appelle l'exploitation familiale, qui nourrisse 90% du monde, malheureusement. Ça ne marche pas. Il y a aussi ce qu'on appelle l'indépendance au niveau de la nourriture. Nous, par exemple, 50% des blés, du pain, on l'importe. En Algérie, c'est grave. Tu vas voir en Afrique qu'ils importent le riz, malgré que nous avons les possibilités. Par exemple, au Maroc, 6 millions d'hectares que nous avons et que nous cultivons. Il est arable, mais on n'arrive pas à avoir cette. Pourquoi? Parce que de toute façon, on est destiné pour les multinationales à exporter les tomates. Donc, on devrait exporter 4 ans, la valeur de 4 ans de tomates pour avoir une année de blé. Regardez-moi, et c'est ça le sommet, je veux dire. Le sommet, je le lis de cette manière. Je le lis en disant que voilà ce qui se passe actuellement devrait passer, devrait continuer. D'accord. Le problème aussi, vous savez très bien que ces dernières 2 décennies, depuis 2007-2008, la crise alimentaire, les mouvements sociaux, la société civile s'est éveillée. Elle a même introduit la FAO, elle a introduit le comité. Et donc, il a organisé ce mécanisme actuel dont on parle. Et ça, de toute façon, on n'en veut pas. Les multinationales, les sociétés transnationales n'en veulent pas parce qu'elle est contre-force, contre-pouvoir. et elles veulent affaiblir, stopper cette avance de ces mouvements sociaux. C'est ça, on comprend un peu ça, on sait très bien que nous sommes dans une situation où il faut s'organiser plus, où il faut parler entre nous plus, et je répète toujours que si un continent, une région va faire beaucoup d'efforts, beaucoup plus que les autres, c'est l'Afrique qui devrait le faire. Et donc, c'est nous, c'est les organisations que nous représentons, c'est les autres organisations qui ne sont pas encore en mesure d'approcher ça, d'appréhender ce qui se passe exactement pour essayer de les mettre ensemble. Donc, à mon avis, nous sommes dans un bon chemin. Et ce qui est très important, à mon avis, c'est de noter que notre position commune, c'est vraiment, elle est très, 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 très précise parce que, premièrement, elle est méthodiquement, elle est bien. On sait ce qu'on défendons, on sait ce qu'on dénonçons. On appelle les gouvernements, et ça, on peut s'arrêter un peu sur le gouvernement. Notre mal, qu'on le veuille et non. Voilà. Oh, je complète. Notre mal, le plus grand mal que nous avons en Afrique, provient de nos gouvernements plus que les multinationales. Donc là, entre nous tous, on doit lutter en premier lieu à l'intérieur de chaque pays et au niveau de chaque organisation. Et merci, mes chers camarades.
Thank you very much, Comrade Mohammed, for that. Just to put our ducks in a row here, our Comrade Mohammed started contextualizing these challenges of the African food system in relation to the initial reflections of Nora. And then because Mohammed dropped off, we invited Mariam to come in, and she already started presenting our points, our views on this leaked common position that is to be presented by the African governments to the UN Food System Summit, which is quite a concerning so-called common position, which we have already started discussing here. And then Mohammed came back to finalize his presentation, giving us a few more elements on the situation of the corporatization and corporate capture of our food systems and the real challenges that we have on the ground in our different countries, as well as the need for us to work nationally to bring our governments to responsibility on this point and mobilize ourselves together to oppose this pressure, this drive that's being pushed to capture our systems even further. So with this slight change of the order of the speakers, we kind of merged session 1 and session 2. At this point, I would like to invite and to say to our listeners, to the 144 of you that are with us in this room, and we are very happy for your presence, that we will allow time for interventions from the floor. I would just like to, before I give the hand, I already see Hamadi who has his hand up. So just before you do, Comrade Hamadi, I'd just like to invite Dieudonné. Is there something that you would like to add at this point, or can I go to the floor and then come back to our assigned speakers for the sessions? Dieudonné, are you there?
Oui, merci beaucoup, Mathieu. Alors, merci vraiment à Nora, à Mohamed, à Mariam pour leur intervention. Alors, en revenant un peu sur l'historique, en fait, donc, de l'accaparement, en fait, donc, de ce sommet, qui semble ne pas être le sommet, donc, des peuples, mais plutôt le sommet des entreprises multinationales qui ont un agenda caché et qui, malheureusement, cet agenda a été, en fait, donc, découvert par nous, les acteurs de la société civile et nous, les acteurs, donc, du secteur agricole. Alors, moi, c'est Dieudonné Pakotogo, je représente l'Europa. Alors, pour revenir un peu, il faut mentionner que c'est très important que tout un chacun de nous sache que ce processus si nous sommes là aujourd'hui à travers cette réunion, c'est quand même il y a eu un travail de suivi, un travail de veille sur tout ce qui se passe au niveau international concernant l'organisation de ce sommet. Alors, je ne serai pas long, mais c'est juste revenir en fait que Nora est revenue en fait sur l'historique pour reconnaître en fait qu'il est clair que c'est un sommet qui ne semble pas prendre en compte les besoins des uns et des autres. Alors, c'est ça qui nous avait amené à l'époque, à travers une position commune que nous avons eue le 27, c'est le 27 juillet, où nous avons tenu en fait à clairement signifier que au niveau donc du consensus mondial, l'objectif c'est de mettre en avant un certain nombre de mauvaises pratiques, telles que par exemple faire passer des engrais synthétiques, des semences industrielles, et penser que ces simples solutions techniques peuvent résoudre le problème des défis de l'agriculture et des systèmes alimentaires africains. Alors, il est clair que ce sont des processus assez naïfs et au pire politiquement et socialement, et je dirais même écologiquement déstabilisants. Alors, il est clair que les systèmes alimentaires africains qui sont capables de nourrir les Africains et toute la planète ont besoin en fait donc de plus de réflexion démocratique qui intègre non seulement les connaissances paysannes, les expériences, les voix des producteurs, pour que nous puissions mettre en place et défendre des systèmes fondés sur les droits de l'homme, la biodiversité, l'intégrité écologique et le bien-être socio-écologique de façon globale. Alors, il est clair encore que quand on regarde un peu notre position commune, et quand on regarde un peu les interventions, la position commune est suffisamment claire parce que nous défendons notre droit à une alimentation saine. Et en tenant compte en fait donc des ressources, des besoins et des conditions de la culture de nos communautés. Et nous estimons que la seule voie que nous pouvons suivre pour soutenir des solutions ancrées en lien avec nos réalités donc, du terrain, c'est que nous puissions mettre en place des mécanismes durables sur nos systèmes alimentaires. Et ce sont des solutions-là qui vont en fait générer des opportunités pour les femmes et les jeunes et aussi renforcer la solidarité et sur le bien-être des populations. Voilà. Et pour revenir un peu sur ce que nous demandons en fait à la société civile africaine, c'est quoi? C'est que nous puissions prendre à cœur toutes les dimensions sociales, économiques, spirituelles, politiques et culturelles de l'alimentation et contester le processus et les résultats prédéterminés donc de ce sommet. Et que nous puissions nous mobiliser pour défendre la vision et les droits du peuple africain en recherchant donc des solutions. Et il est clair aussi que nous ne pouvons que demander à la société civile de s'engager et de veiller à ce que, par exemple, des lettres telles que, par exemple, la position de l'Union africaine sur l'organisation de ce sommet soit en fait que tout le monde sache que en fait, c'est une position qui n'est pas suffisamment inclusive. Ça veut dire qu'il ne prend pas en compte les réalités donc, de la base, comme Mariam l'a dit. Donc, ça veut dire qu'il y a un problème. Et ce sont des positions similaires, par exemple, qui en fait ouvrent la voie aux multinationales pour l'accaparement de nos richesses, pour l'accaparement de nos terres. Voilà ce que je voulais dire concernant en fait donc mon point de vue et revenir un peu sur la position commune que nous avons défendue le 27 juillet. Merci Mathias.
Thank you very much, Dieudonné. I'm being advised by my colleagues in the organization just to provide a little bit of information to help contextualize anyone that might not be following this issue from the beginning. In the 27th July, there was the pre-summit of the UN Food System Summit. We, as part of the global movement that is opposing this initiative and is quite concerned with the risks that it is posing to our food system and to the legal and policy spaces in the UN that have been developed to tackle this thematic. We also organized, we were part of the counter pre-summit mobilizations from where this common position from our African social movements emerged. I will ask, I've seen that Deirdre put this in the chat before. I will ask her to, by the end of this session, organize one post with all the links together so that people have it in an easy reference. We are coming to now in the 27th September, the actual UN Food System Summit, which is mostly going to be a space for governments to say what they are voluntarily committing to do regarding this issue. Where we as civil society in Africa and the world will also be organized in our counter mobilizations to build what we believe is the true pathway to addressing the challenges of our food system globally, continentally, and nationally. Recently, there was this leak of this position of the African Union that is apparently going to be presented on the 23rd in the Food System Summit. And this is what calls the need for the meeting we are here now and the interventions that we have heard so far. I hope that helps put things into order in people's minds and contextualize everyone. So I've had a hand from Hamadi from the floor. You've been waiting for quite some time, Hamadi. I will bring you in now. And I'll also like to ask to any other of you, I know we have Nzira from the World March of Women with us, or anyone else that would like to have a word on this, to just raise your hand and I'll call you as soon as Hamadi comes in. Hamadi, I'll give you, and forgive me for being authoritarian here, but I'll give you 3 minutes for your intervention. And maybe you'll be lucky if there's no one else to speak after you, I can give you some more time. Hamadi.
Merci, merci de m'avoir donné la parole. Ça fait vraiment longtemps et c'est un plaisir pour moi de vous retrouver tous parce que ça me fait environ 3 mois. Je n'ai pas participé aux appels depuis le 27 de vous voir tous. Et ce que je veux dire en réalité, n'ayant pas suivi toutes les activités de mobilisation migratoire ouvertes, je pense qu'elle est bienvenue. Elle est bienvenue en ce sens que nous devons se mobiliser rapidement pour essayer de recadrer la position de l'IA, de l'Union africaine, car je la trouve vraiment contradictoire par rapport aux engagements des États membres qui ont souscrit à de nombreux outils de forums, de cadres de concertation de dialogue dans le cadre des Nations Unies, dont les outils du CSA. Pour rappel, les États membres de l'Union africaine ont souscrit aux nombreux outils du CSA, notamment les cadres d'action pour la sécurité alimentaire et la nutrition, la décennie des Nations Unies pour l'agriculture familiale, les directives récemment volontaires sur le système alimentaire. Tous ces outils, les États africains ont souscrit et je me pose la question comment l'Union africaine veut se lancer dans une aventure qui contredit un peu les engagements des États membres. Le secteur de production des systèmes alimentaires, notamment les producteurs, les petits producteurs, les petits exploitants, les femmes, les jeunes, les autochtones, tous ceux qui travaillent du secteur primaire, qui contribuent comme production des systèmes alimentaires, des produits alimentaires. Je me demande comment l'Union africaine est en train d'aller. Notre combat est légitime pour essayer de déstabiliser un peu cette position avant le sommet et au cours du sommet. Donc, c'est ce que je veux dire en réalité. Et je suis vraiment très content de vous avoir retrouvé ce matin. Donc, nous avons un problème de connexion, ça continue, ça vient, ça répare. Donc, aujourd'hui, j'ai l'occasion et je me réjouis. Merci, merci à tous et bon courage pour la mobilisation. Merci.
Thank you, Hamadi. Hamadi, let me just ask you, where are you speaking from?
Oui, je suis à Tombouctou, au Mali.
Okay, thank you very much. From
Je
Mali.
suis à Tombouctou, au Mali.
From Timbuktu. Merci.
Ça fait longtemps, j'ai été interrompu. Ma connexion a été interrompue juste au moment de la mobilisation le 27 juillet. Mais depuis lors, je n'ai plus parlé. Donc voilà, je suis un peu débranché en fait. C'est une grande joie pour moi de vous retrouver aujourd'hui. Merci et du courage. Courage.
Thank you, Comrade Hamadi from Timbuktu in Mali. Yes, indeed, you raise an important question, which is something that we ourselves are grappling with. How is it that our governments can go against their own decisions, as exemplified by this so-called common position by the African Union regarding the Food System Summit? And this is one key concern that we are asking in our common letter to the states. Our feeling, as explained in the letter, is that there's a small group in the AU that is driving this action and putting us into this predicament. Thank you very much for that once again. I noted while Hamadi was speaking that some people opened their microphones, and I have to tell you that I was the one who muted you. Just because I wasn't sure if you wanted to speak or not. But if it is the case that you do want to speak, I will ask you to just raise your hand or type us a message in the chat. We have comrades watching the chat closely, and they will help identifying anyone who wants to take the word. We have half an hour left in our session, and I have 3 hands. I'll start with our comrade Christiana. You want to come in, please? Christiana and the others, as you introduce yourselves, as you start your intervention, I would invite you to please tell us where you're speaking from so that we can get a sense of how continental are we actually. Thank you. Ms. Christiana, over to you.
Thank you, Matthias. I was listening very keenly to our speakers when they were giving their presentations, and I really would like to thank them for being very active and to the point. And my name is Christiana Saitillowa. I come from Lake Turkana, Kenya. I'm the coordinator of the El Molo Forum there, and I'm also the World Forum of Fisher People's co-chair, and based in Kenya. So I would like to mention just a few points, and that involves fisheries especially. Although fisheries by small-scale fishers and fishing communities is an everyday source of food and nutrition to millions in Africa, and indeed in the world, fisheries has never been a priority in our countries. Their contribution to our food security, to our development, is overlooked and unappreciated. All small-scale food producers, including indigenous peoples, women, and workers, continue to be marginalized and excluded from decision-making processes in their countries. their spaces in decision-making have extremely shrunk. So I'd just like to take an example of my country, Kenya, for instance, in relation to what I've mentioned before, is that we have what we call public participation in decision-making in both levels of government, that is in the county government and the national government. So we have what they call public participation by citizens to influence policies and to make decisions. But what they call public participation by citizens, we actually call it cherry-picking participation by those invited by the government and corporations, because it is them who invite people to these meetings, the companies through the government or vice versa. So they handpick the people they want in those tables of decision-making. It is through these systems of cherry-picking participation that has sold our heritage, our lands, our national resources, and our souls to corporations. It is the few cherries with their masters that make decisions that affect all our people. African traditional knowledge in food system, which is very rich and has sustained populations for centuries, is eroding systematically. It's being eroded and replaced by the knowledge pushed by the corporations on food systems in Africa. Our governments must come against this and depend more on the tradition, on the African traditional knowledge on food system that has sustained people. Africa, we forget very, very fast. It is just the other day we came out of colonization. And African states continue to listen to the voices of those who had colonized us instead of listening to the voices of their people. I mean, African states must listen to the voices of their people and not the voice of the powerful and their sacks of money. I'll stop there for the moment. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Christiana, for bringing those insights from you as a fisher folk in the global movement, but also from your specific reality in Kenya. I would like to, I have now 3 people on my list. I have Nzira, Vanessa, and Ruth. I will go to Nzira first. And as Nzira gets ready to intervene, I'll just remind or inform you all that Nzira will be speaking in Portuguese. So if you don't speak Portuguese, now is a very important moment for you to switch on your interpretation. So again, there's a little globe in the bottom of your screen. You click on it and you choose the language that you prefer. This is if you are on your computer, just to ensure that you get the interpretation from Nzira. To note that there will, this is like a consecutive, well, it's like a relayed translation, so there might be a small delay as between Nzira speaking and you receiving the message. Just be patient with that. Thank you, Nzira. Welcome. Please make sure that you tell us where you're coming, we're speaking from as well as you start. Thank you. I know
eu sei. Yeah. Obrigada, Mateus. E obrigada por esta oportunidade. Vou tentar falar devagar. Vou tirar a câmera porque pode melhorar a minha conexão e hoje está um pouco fraca. Meu nome é Nzira de Deus. Eu estou em Moçambique, muito próxima de Mateus, como ele disse. Sou do Fórum Mulher e da Marcha Mundial das Mulheres e também faço parte do grupo da Constituência de Jovens do Mecanismo da Sociedade Civil e estamos a acompanhar com alguma preocupação estes pronunciamentos que estão sendo feitos de África, sendo que nós, como jovens africanos, não temos sentido o nosso envolvimento nestes processos, nestas discussões. Não só a nível da União Africana, mesmo a nível dos nossos países, é um desafio muito grande o nosso envolvimento. Nós, em África, crescemos aprendendo que somos um país rico, que temos terra, temos recursos e devemos produzir, e aprendemos desde cedo a produzir, desde crianças. Os jovens que somos, participamos ativamente ao lado dos nossos pais, das nossas comunidades na produção, na lavoura e na comercialização, principalmente. Aqui em África, em nosso país também é comum que nós participemos e sentimos-nos gratos e gratas por estarmos envolvidos nestas atividades, por alimentar as nossas famílias, por conseguirmos, com os excedentes, poder ter algum recurso para poder adquirir outras necessidades que nós tenhamos. São experiências, são aprendizados muito valiosos para nós. Infelizmente, isso não é tomado em consideração no nosso continente e nos nossos países. Temos visto com preocupação os nossos governos assinarem memorandos de entendimento, assinarem acordos com companhias e vindo as nossas comunidades devastando as nossas terras. Primeiro nos expulsam, tiram-nos das nossas terras, das nossas machambas e nos colocam em zonas sem nenhuma condição de produção alimentar, muitas vezes zonas secas e sem água. Como jovens, nós estamos aqui a chamar a atenção aos nossos governos e queremos dizer isto aqui neste encontro, que nós negamos e denunciamos estes acordos e estes posicionamentos que os chefes de Estados africanos e os governos têm estado a fazer, porque primeiro não nos representam, nós não nos sentimos parte deste processo, nós não estamos sendo envolvidos. Os recursos naturais de África devem ser protegidos para nós, para o nosso futuro. O que será de nós, jovens africanos, se as nossas terras são todas alocadas às grandes corporações? Onde é que nós iremos viver? O que é que nós iremos ensinar depois também aos nossos filhos? Este caminho que está sendo tomado não é o caminho que nós queremos, não é o caminho que nós defendemos. Nós queremos ser reconhecidos, acima de tudo, como sujeitos de direito, como trabalhadores da terra, e queremos construir uma África e nações prósperas. Só assim é que nós podemos avançar. Infelizmente, já foi provado, e tem sido provado, estamos a assistir, que as políticas e os caminhos estão sendo adotados só têm nos levado à fome, a empobrecimento, à malnutrição, e, portanto, aí, acima de tudo, ao fim e à destruição da nossa biodiversidade. O continente não está à venda. Nós não podemos continuar a aceitar que os nossos governos assim hajam em destruição, destruindo o nosso futuro. E não pode ser ignorada esta nossa demanda. Por isso que nós assinamos esta declaração que foi submetida e exigimos que sejamos escutados, exigimos espaços também para podermos partilhar as nossas visões, as nossas perspectivas, e não sendo colocados, não sendo tratados como se fôssemos um grupo minoritário, um grupo que não sabe o que quer, porque nós sabemos o que queremos e estamos convictos que o caminho que nós todos temos que seguir como africanos é da proteção da nossa natureza, é o caminho da agroecologia que defende e protege a nossa biodiversidade. Não vou me prolongar muito, Mateus, e agradecer e desejar a todos nós uma mobilização massiva nesta contra-mobilização, porque só assim nós podemos proteger o nosso continente. A luta continua. Obrigada a todos.
Obrigado, Nzira. Thank you, Nzira, very much for those powerful points. Over to Vanessa. Vanessa, I'm going to ask you to please try to take maybe 2 or 3 minutes. I'm sorry for this. We're almost done with our session and there's a few people still that want to take the floor. Thank you. Over to you.
I'm going to stop the video now as well. So I just wanted to add onto the points that others have made, just how I feel so angry that in that whole document, agroecology is not mentioned once. but all the other innovative approaches that the private sector has been trying to push into the agroecology process in the CFS are listed. So we see from climate smart to just so many. And the one area that I wanted to draw attention to is the whole issue of nutrition. So this whole process is supposedly to address food insecurity, but the kinds of proposals that they're making is biofortification, food fortification, a focus on safety issues in the informal sector. And if we look at a country like South Africa, which has already embraced this approach, what we can learn from it is not the informal sector that's the problem, it's this industrial food system. We've been implementing it for years in South Africa, and yet we have at least a quarter of South Africans that are extremely food insecure. We've got, in 2019, 13% of our population with diabetes, which has just been skyrocketing. We've got 30% of our population being obese. So these kinds of strategies do not address the core that we're trying to address. So it's just very alarming that these are the kinds of proposals and focus that's in this document, which is clearly just the industrial and commodity approach in the private sector trying to influence and take over our food system. Yeah, and then also just to mention, they note some of the structural inequalities, but again, not addressing it. And in South Africa, again, the food safety issues haven't come about in the informal sector. It's been this mass industrialization of imported processed meats, etc., that are dumped in our country and also totally destroy the local market. So dumping of poultry, dumping of milk products that have destroyed our local industry here. So yeah, just to note all those. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Vanessa, for that. I'll go over to Ruth Longridge. Again, I ask you to just introduce yourself, tell us where you're from, and keep it short and neat. I'm sorry for this, but thank you for being here.
I'm really grateful to be here. Thank you very much, everybody. I'm so grateful that you've been doing all this work that I haven't been involved with for all this time. I'm in Johannesburg. I'm just an ordinary little old lady. I think that what is happening is part of the whole pharmaceutical, medical, chemical, industrial movement to capture the globe. It's not, we're looking at things in a little bit of silos, food separate from what's happening elsewhere. And basically we realize that they all have the same agenda and that it's not a matter of if our lands are taken, it's a matter of when. The whole thing is being disguised. So when they talk about sustainable matters, they're actually talking about the opposite of what we know to be sustainable. And I have two suggestions that we can push back. The one is that we have what we call Cash Fridays, where everybody who is using money doesn't use bank cards. I'm assuming that nobody here is using big corporations to buy online. And also that we take what is now being proposed as 2 weeks to flatten tyranny, which is basically from the 1st of October to not use any bank cards, not use any way of supporting the industries that are basically behind all of this. They're not just doing it in Africa, they're doing it in India, they're doing it in the Americas, they're doing it in Europe. It's a global thing. We know this. So I'm asking everybody, I'm going to put my email up, ask everybody to copy my email me. Let's get in touch. Let's talk about what we can do as solutions. Fortunately, in South Africa, we have elections coming up, so we're going to actually corner the opposition and ask them about these things too. Yes, and I'm so grateful to you all. Bless you all for what you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ruth, for those inspiring words. I will encourage everyone really to also continue your interactions in the chat with us and with each other. It's another layer of conversation that we can use amongst ourselves. Over to now Yakuba, and then Mersha and Edwin, and then I will have to close this interaction. Yakuba, very quickly, please, over to you. Yakuba, I see you switched on your camera, but your mic is still off. You need to unmute yourself.
Oui, bonjour Mathéos. Bonjour à tous et à toutes. Moi, c'est Yakuba Kanazoe. Je suis consultant, je représente en fait l'ONG belge Brodelic Dylan, qui intervient au Burkina Faso à travers des programmes de soutien à l'agriculture familiale et à la souveraineté alimentaire. Et en fait, mon intervention porte sur juste un petit témoignage et une question. Alors, le témoignage, c'est qu'au Burkina Faso, comme dans les autres pays, voilà, nous avons entamé le processus de préparation du sommet à travers des concertations nationales que le gouvernement a organisées. Et parallèlement, la société civile aussi a organisé des concertations indépendantes. Donc, ce qui a abouti en fait à des résultats très pertinents en termes d'élaboration de la voie nationale pour des systèmes alimentaires durables, et résilients et équitables. Et donc, les propositions faites au niveau de la société civile ont été reversées au niveau de la partie gouvernementale. Et nous sommes heureux, en tout cas, de constater que la plupart de nos propositions ont été prises en compte dans la concertation finale qui a abouti, en fait, à l'élaboration d'une voie nationale, et notamment les grands piliers, donc qui prennent en compte nos propositions. Donc, nous voulons dire qu'il y a un de mes prédécesseurs ici qui avait dit qu'en fait, le combat ne devrait pas en fait s'adresser uniquement aux multinationales, mais c'est au niveau national. C'est avec nos États que le combat doit en fait se mener. Et si en fait on mène le combat, on gagne le combat au niveau de nos États, c'est sûr qu'en fait au niveau du sommet, les choses ne vont pas aller peut-être dans le sens où nous voyons. Donc ça c'est un aspect. Ça, c'est un aspect important que je voulais en fait souligner. Et maintenant, bon, la question que je me pose, c'est, Mathieu avait parlé de la contre-mobilisation en fait en marge du sommet le 23 septembre. Je voulais avoir des questions, en fait des éclairages par rapport à l'organisation de cette contre-mobilisation et comment en fait nous, en tant que société civile burkinabé, nous pouvons aussi en fait y participer. Je vous remercie pour la parole.
Thank you, Yakuba. To Mersha and to Edwin, my deepest apologies to you, but I will have to move on to the final stage of our discussion. We only have 10 minutes left on our clock, and we are counting with very good work with our interpreters that can't go much further than that. So please forgive me. I will ask you to put your comments on the chat for everyone to follow. My apologies for this, really. Thank you for that final question, Yakuba. And for that, actually, it's a good segue into our final session, which is on next steps. And here, I can only have a chance to briefly first invite Mariam. Mariam, I actually don't even know if we have time for you to present to the group here the main demands that we are making of our governments. I'm sorry for that. I'll ask Dieudonné to come in to just give us a briefing, a short briefing on the next steps that we're planning towards the counter summit and beyond. And also to make a note that my colleague Deidre is going to put, or has put in the chat, and I'm going to ask her to do it again, to put in the chat a link to a document that has all the links to all the documents. It's the best way that we have found to organize all the information for you. You can find our statement there from the 27th July. You can find the Africa so-called common position there. You can find our response to that position by the AU also there, and you also will find a link to sign our declarations as well. So Dieudonné, if you will indulge us, please take us through very quickly, if you may, through what are we planning in terms of next steps, also for people to continue engage and as we build this movement stronger and broader. Dieudonné, are you with us?
Ok. Oui, merci Mathéus. Voilà, donc je pense que ce qu'on peut préconiser au regard en fait de l'intervention des uns et des autres, que je trouve quand même très pertinent et qui vient en fait reconforter la position commune lors donc que nous avons proposé lors du contre-sommet. Alors, et en lien aussi avec donc la lettre de l'Union africaine, il serait intéressant que pour nos prochaines étapes, nous puissions adresser une lettre. C'est vrai, il y a déjà la lettre ouverte, mais que nous écrivons à l'Union africaine pour attirer son attention sur leur position concernant en fait donc le sommet sur les systèmes alimentaires. Parce qu'il faut qu'on attire l'attention de l'Union africaine que ces genres donc de lettres sont en fait donc une autoroute, si on peut l'appeler ainsi, pour favoriser en fait donc l'accaparement de nos systèmes alimentaires par les multinationales. Et ça serait intéressant que dans cette lettre, nous puissions revenir un peu sur ce que nous défendons, notre vision et aussi ce que nous attendons des gouvernements africains et aussi du système des Nations Unies. Et cela va permettre en fait à l'Union africaine de se positionner aussi par rapport au sommet sur les systèmes alimentaires, et je précise que nous rejetons. Parce que au-delà donc de ce sommet qui aura lieu ce mois, il faut qu'on puisse développer une stratégie pour maintenir la communication avec l'Union africaine et faire un plaidoyer sur ce que nous pensons vraiment comme étant légitime et sur ce que nous revendiquons. Voilà, donc c'est pour résumer, il faut dire que la prochaine étape, allons-y avec la lettre ouverte, mais adressons un courrier à l'Union africaine pour dénoncer pour donner notre point de vue et faciliter donc le dialogue avec l'Union africaine pour qu'à la suite de ce sommet, nous puissions continuer en fait donc les échanges. Voilà ce que je pourrais proposer comme prochain pas au nom d'Europa. Merci.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Dieudonné. I keep apologizing for time, but really it's a limitation of the time-space continuum that we are in. We always would like to have more time to speak. Unfortunately, always someone does not have a chance to make quite an important comment in our sessions, but it's the cards that we are dealt with, and we thank all of you for your engagement so far. Mersha did mention, I want to make a quick note to her, the comment in the chat that it's unfortunate that we are often talking about the issues. She says propagandist, but we don't develop concrete country level mobilizations to hold our governments accountable. And that really is a comment, I believe, to all of us to do these mobilizations, to join this movement and mobilize your own groups, your own constituencies, your own networks around this quite important process that we are trying to bring attention to. I will also ask you to please use those materials that we have shared in that document that Deidre posted on the chat, to share with your constituencies, with your networks, to push this information as wide as we can. And finally, to make note that the recording, as soon as it's available, will be shared with everyone who was in this session, who registered for the event. Let me see if I have everything. Also, we are suggesting the organizations and individuals that are here to take this letter this open letter that we are sending to the AU, and adapt it yourself and send it to your own government, in a push, and your local media as well, to increase visibility and chances that we will get a proper response from our governments on this. I would like to invite, as we close now, Magdalena Ackerman for some key points on the global mobilization, counter-mobilization that will take place from now until the 23rd of September. And once again, my apologies for those who still want to take the floor to speak. We just don't have enough time. My apologies. I'll ask you to put your comments in the chat for the others to react and listen to your voices in another way. Thank you. To Magdalena, please, you're welcome, and please take the floor. Tell us where you're speaking from as well, if you may.
Yeah, hello everyone, and thank you, Mateus. I'm speaking from Rome, Italy, but I'm originally from Argentina. And thank you for having me in this short time that we have left, and also congratulations for all these events that you have been planning and successfully also organizing. It's really inspiring. So I would just like to share briefly what we are planning at the global level to contest the UN Food System Summit. The summit will take place on the 23rd of September, so already next week. And in view of that, we have organized several activities to continue the process that started back in July as part of our autonomous response to the Food System Summit. So first of all, we have circulated yesterday a political declaration, and this political declaration is based on the global one that we shared and presented in July. So it's an updated version of that political declaration, taking into account also the discussions that we held back in July during our counter mobilizations. This political declaration, now we have also included a signatories segment. So we are encouraging all of you and all the organizations participating in this autonomous response to the Food System Summit to sign this letter to really show the strength of our response, of our collective action to denounce the Food System Summit. This political declaration is a complementary document, an additional one to the letter that is being circulated now through the chat, the letter to the African Union. So I will share then the different link for this global political declaration. So we encourage signatures by September 21 for this political declaration. Then, as a second activity that we are planning or organizing is a policy briefing, a very targeted policy briefing with member states delegates. Member states delegates in Rome, in New York, and in Geneva. This policy briefing is organized by the liaison group, who has been facilitating this global process. And the policy briefing will take place next Monday, 20th. And the aim of this policy briefing is to share with member states delegates our concerns and the risks we see with this Food System Summit. Then a third activity is a public briefing, which will be a much more open event. And this public briefing will be held on the 22nd of September from 2 p.m. until 4 p.m. Rome time. And this will also be an event to share our concerns, but to include a wide range, a broader range of participation, including the organizations that are part of this process, but also possibly the press. We will be sharing more information soon about this public briefing, either today or tomorrow. Then, as a last item, and I will close here, sorry, Mateus, is the social media storm, which we are planning during the 23rd of September, which is the day of the official summit. So we are planning to have a Twitter storm, but also through other social media platforms at 4 p.m. Rome time. Again, for this social media storm, we will be sharing more information, particularly with the package that we could use through our social media channels to denounce the Food System Summit that will take place on the 23rd of September. So thank you so much, and hope to see you very soon also.
Thank you very much, Magdalena, for those inputs. We are grateful to all of you for your participation in this very rich but very short session that we just had together. I want to thank everyone that was quite active on the chat. It's very inspiring to see the conversations that are happening between you all in the chat. I want to mention quickly here our comrade Mohan, who says that this exchange around Africa around food system should be more frequent in order to share positions and advance the defending of our common positions. We agree very much with you, and perhaps you are hinting at work that we can do together beyond the Food System Summit. Thank you to everyone. This is all the time that we have for today. As we close, I would like to ask you, or to remind you once again, to access those documents that Deidre and I have been putting in the chat, to let you know that when we share the recording, we will also share all the documents that we are mentioning here again with you. And I'm inviting all of you to just open your cameras if you may, if you like, to say hi and to say bye really to everyone, so that we can get a nice group shot. Before, if you have time, before we close, we are going to be playing a short video, a nice, very nice song that for you guys as we close. Thank you very much to everyone. Food system for the people. Globalize the struggle, globalize hope. Thank you very much.
protect woman. Woman, you're important. You are brave, you are strong, fast. Yeah, unamandla ngithala abantu. Yo, enkosi mama. Sisi gogo, auntie, Umfazi. Oh yeah, oh yo, oh yeah, oh yo, oh yeah, oh yo.
See